Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in June. I read a total of 11 books. That is crazy. New record for the year. Granted, 3 of them at least were super short, in fact probably considered novellas or, just really small, short books, but they still count. A book read is a book read. I don't know what my hair is trying to do today. So we're just gonna get started talking about them. I'll just talk about them in the order that I read them, just to keep things simple. So the first book that I finished was The Words We Lost by Nicole Deese. This is Fog Harbor book number 1. And we follow Ingrid, is her name. Oh goodness, I'm trying to remember. June 1st feels like a long time ago, trying to remember all the details about the book, but also not give any spoilers. I think it'll just be easier to read the description of the book, so let's just do that. A contemporary romance about books, friendship, and second chance love. 3 friends, 2 broken promises, 1 missing manuscript. As a senior acquisitions editor for Fog Harbor Books in San Francisco, Ingrid Erickson has rejected many a manuscript for lack of defined conflict and dramatic irony, 2 elements her current life possesses in spades. In the months following the death of her childhood best friend and international best-selling author Cecilia, Ingrid... In the months following the death of her childhood best friend and international bestseller author Cecilia Campbell, Ingrid has not only lost her ability to escape into fiction due to a rare trauma response, but she's also desperate to find the closure she's convinced will come with Cecilia's missing final manuscript. After Ingrid jeopardizes her career, she fears her future will remain irrevocably broken. But then Joel Campbell, the man who shattered her belief in happily ever afters, offers her a sealed envelope from his late cousin Cecilia, asking Joel... The words are kind of like messed up. The grammar is not correct in this description on Goodreads. Hold on, let me try this again. From his late cousin Cecilia, asking Joel and her to put their differences aside and retrieve a mysterious package in their coastal Washington hometown. Honoring Cecilia's last request will challenge their convictions and test their loyalties, but through it all, will Ingrid and Joel be brave enough to uncover a twice-in-a-lifetime love? The Words We Lost is thought-provoking and tender, capturing the transformative beauty of surviving. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I adored this book. This is my first Nicole Deese book, and I don't know, the depth of this book and the characters, I absolutely love them. And I love the way she handled grief, because everyone grieves differently, but just the way it was handled in this book, I thought it was beautifully done, and I'm a fan of her writing, and I really enjoyed it. I rated it 4 stars. I don't know what it was that didn't quite make it a 5-star book, because I don't really have any complaints. It just didn't give me that feeling, I guess, but pretty close to it. It was really good, and I loved the bookish elements of it, like with Ingrid working in publishing and the hunt to find the missing manuscript, and just all of those little details, the bookish details of everything. I loved all of that. Again, it feels like it's been so long since I read it. I don't have a whole lot more to say other than that, but I do recommend it. It was great. And I did go ahead and read the second book, but we'll talk about that later. Let's just keep going in order of the books that I finished. The next one that I finished was Up From Dust by Heather Kaufman. So this is Women of the Way book number 1, and Heather Kaufman wrote one of my all-time favorite books, The Story People. It's up on my shelf somewhere, but yes, she wrote that one was one of my all-time favorite books, and I've never picked up any of her other books, but my friend Erica highly recommended this one to me, and I'm so glad I picked it up. It was a 5-star read for me. This is Martha's story, like Martha and Mary and Lazarus in the Bible, and obviously it is fiction, it's biblical fiction, but there are elements of the real, true biblical story in here as well. But the first half of the book is just Heather Kaufman's own imagination and story of what Martha's life could have been like growing up. And It was beautiful. I often struggle with biblical fiction just because I never want the fiction to take away from the real, true biblical story, but we do have so few details in the Bible about some of these characters, and I do it myself while I'm reading a story, wanting the background of their lives, what led them to these moments, and just kind of imagining what their lives would have been like. I do it myself a lot with them, and we'll never know until heaven, I guess, but this was just a job well done. It was beautiful storytelling. She also handled the topic of grief in this book, and I thought it was very well done. It was heartbreaking, it was beautiful, it made me cry. Maybe not actual tears, but I did tear up, I think. Like, I wasn't expecting that, but my heart broke many times for Martha. And while it's obviously not factual that this was Martha's story, it did put her, like, the true biblical story into a different perspective for me. And I feel like I'm struggling getting my words out today, so that's my bad. I adored this book. I loved Martha and Mary and Lazarus as well in the whole story. Just the things that Martha went through, then when Jesus enters the scene, and how he just cared for her heart and loved her as he loves all of us. It was so lovely. I adored this book, and I immediately ordered the next book in the series because, yeah, this is only my second book by Heather Kaufman, but it has not disappointed, and I don't know that she will ever disappoint me if they're all as good as this one was. So yes, there's that. Then the next one that I picked up was Honor in the Dust by Gilbert Morris, and this unfortunately was a major flop. I'm just gonna say that. Gilbert Morris is one of my all-time favorite historical fiction writers. I adore his House of Winslow series, and this is part of the Winslow Breed novels, so this would, I guess, technically be the House of Winslow's ancestors while they still lived in England. And I don't know, it flopped so badly. There was no depth. The characters were they were not fleshed out very well. And this story, I saw on another review on Goodreads, there were a lot of people very disappointed in this book. There was a certain review that I read that pointed out that this book is pretty much the exact same plot line as the first book in the Wakefield Dynasty series. The more I read it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is pretty much exactly like the first one of the Wakefield Dynasty series. They were right. And just the characters and things were switched around a little bit. But I loved the Wakefield Dynasty, and I don't know what happened with this one. This is one of his later books. The man wrote so many books. This was like an interview in the back of the book, and they asked him, why did you wait so long to begin writing? He said, I taught literature on all levels, but it never occurred to me that I could write a book. One day I read a bad book and thought, I can write a better book than that. I did, and sent it off. It came back. I sent it off again. 27 rejections later, the novel was accepted. I was 55. So he started writing pretty late in life, and then he proceeded to write. It says here that he was shocked to realize that he's published one book a month in the last 25 years. So I guess at some point that's just a lot of writing. It's understandable if some of the storylines start to mesh together, and that there's going to be some flops in there, because I was talking to Erica about it, because she also read one of his other books that majorly flopped for her, and I said, I feel like I'm having an identity crisis as a reader, because he is one of my all-time favorite authors. Like, why am I struggling with this book so much? It's been a really long time since I've read some of his other books, and it's been a really even longer since I've read the Winslow series. But I remember just loving the Winslow series, and the depth of the characters and the writing and the faith content and the historical aspect of it all. I thought it was so well done, and I was like, you know, maybe it's been so long that if I go back and read his other books, are they gonna be just as bad as this one was? Like, did my reading taste change that dramatically? Or what happened? I felt like an identity crisis as a reader. But she said that she also, like, she's read some of his other books more recently, and she said they definitely had more depth. And the characters were better fleshed out. The plot line was better. Everything was just better in some of his other books. So I guess even your favorite authors can have major flops. It was so disappointing. I pretty much skim read the rest of the book, so I guess technically it could be considered a DNF. I rated it only 1 star. So basically, just don't start with this book if you want to read some of Gilbert Morris's work. This is not his best work. He has so much better books out there. I guess maybe I should try reading them again and see if my tastes and my thoughts on the books have changed, but I don't remember. I think this is one of his later books, and I was just so bored. We're not going to spend any more time on that. Just don't judge his works based off of this one if this is the only book you've ever read of Gilbert Morris. And please don't pick that one up. He has written better ones. Anyway, moving on to better. I think that was the only book that I did not enjoy out of all of the 11 books that I read this month. So that's a win, at least. Next, I picked up A Return of Devotion by Christiane Hunter. This is book number 2 in the Haven Manor series. This whole series is more centered around helping, I guess you could say, compromised women of high society that have either been taken advantage of, willingly or unwillingly, and have basically fallen away from high society and were rejected and ended up pregnant outside of wedlock. And the first book deals more with the 2 best friends who kind of made it their life mission because they both were in that exact scenario. They started a home for these women and for the children, because the children often end up in even worse situations because they're not accepted by their fathers. And the first book focused more on Kit, I think is her name, and then this one is Daphne, the other friend of hers. And at the end of the first book, this might be kind of a spoiler but not really, the home that they were living in and using for this place of refuge switched owners, and so they had to find homes for the children, get the girls or women hired off into good jobs, and put the home back to rights because they had switched it, like stored all of the furniture, taken away all of the expensive furnishings, and stored them in the attic so that the children wouldn't ruin them. They just like changed it into a children's home pretty much, and so they had to switch all of that back to how it originally was because the new owner was coming to live at the house. And yeah, so enter William, the Marquis of Chelmsford. His main goal in life is to be the exact opposite of his father. Starting a new life in the peace and quiet of the country sounds perfect until his housekeeper turns his life upside down. And his housekeeper is Daphne, one of the ladies. So she and I think at least one of the other ladies and a few of the children stay at the home and take on the role as like the servants of the place to keep it running. And Daphne is trying to hide the original purpose of the home from him because she didn't know how he would respond to that situation, everything. There is a romance. It was a beautiful story. I love this series. I rated it 4 stars. It's a lovely series. I have one more book to read in the series. I don't really remember what like era this is written in. Possibly Victorian? Okay. Regency era. That would make more sense than Victorian. Yeah, so this is set during the Regency era. I at least haven't read a ton of books that deal with this topic, but I loved the perspective of the ministry that Daphne and her friend started because of the compromised situation they found themselves in, and just the redemption and forgiveness and the work that God did in their hearts, which then turned into a ministry for other women who found themselves in the same or worse situations. And that aspect of the Regency era is never really talked about. And I appreciated that about this series especially, and I'm looking forward to reading the third book in the series, because it's going to be about one of the other girl that was kind of in charge of the home and the children, and I'm really excited about her story because it sounds so intriguing. But anyway, that was A Return of Devotion by Christy Ann Hunter. These two books were part of the 25 in 2025 books that I'm trying to get through, so it was fun to take some of those off the list. Anyway, moving on, I then picked up The Lady and the Highwayman by Sarah M. Eden. So if you watched my last video, which was a reading vlog, I briefly mentioned this book. This is part of the Dread Penny Society book series. It's a proper romance. It's clean, but it's not necessarily Christian fiction. But yeah, so there's basically this society called the Dread Pennies. Dread Pennies, they're authors, and they write these short little penny dreadful books, I guess. The description can say it much better than I can, as usual, so I'm gonna read that. Sorry, my thoughts are just a little bit scattered today, so I'm having a hard time, you know, sharing my thoughts, so bear with me please. But Elizabeth Black is the headmistress of a girls' school and a well-respected author of Silver Fork novels, stories written both for and about the upper-class ladies of Victorian society. But by night, she writes a very different kind of story, the penny dreadfuls that are all the rage among the working-class men. Under the pseudonym Mr. King, Elizabeth has written about dashing heroes fighting supernatural threats and dangerous outlaws romancing helpless women. They contain all the adventure and mystery that her real life lacks. Fletcher Walker began life as a street urchin, but is now the most successful author in the penny dreadful market. That is, until Mr. King started taking all of his readers and his profits. No one knows who King is, including Fletcher's fellow members of the Dread Penny Society, a fraternity of authors dedicated to secretly fighting for the rights of the less fortunate. Determined to find the elusive Mr. King, Fletcher approaches Miss Black. As a fellow author, she is well known among the high-class writers. Perhaps she could be persuaded to make some inquiries as to Mr. King's whereabouts. Elizabeth agrees to help Fletcher, if only to ensure her secret identity is never discovered. For the first time, Elizabeth experiences the thrill of a cat-and-mouse adventure reminiscent of one of her own novels as she tries to throw Fletcher off her scent. But the more time they spend together, the more she loses her heart. It's upper class against working class, author against author, where readers' reputations and romance are all on the line. So that whole description captured my attention, and the review that I saw on Goodreads, I'm not even sure who it was that read it, but I was very curious about the story. It looked so interesting, and the way the reviewer, talked about the books, I was like, that sounds like something I would enjoy. And I did. I rated it 4 stars, but throughout the book, I found myself getting super distracted, and my mind would wander, and I don't know if that was because I felt like I was in a little bit of a reading slump, and when that happens, even if the book is good, I find myself getting distracted, forgetting what I read, having to go back and reread it, and I don't think it's the story's fault. So don't base your judgments off of what I'm saying here, because it was a really fun and exciting story. And within the book itself as well, you're reading Fletcher's and Mr. King's book, the Penny Dreadful book that they are both writing. So you're kind of reading 3 books in one in this book. Yeah, like I said, you're getting to read the stories that they're publishing, which I enjoyed that aspect of it for the most part. I didn't just love the Penny Dreadfuls are books that I probably wouldn't really enjoy reading as much, just because they're not really my style. But the overall story of The Lady and the Highwayman was like Fletcher and Elizabeth's romance and their friendship and the missions they were involved on together of helping the less fortunate on the street. All of those things I absolutely loved, and that was so fun. But again, I think it was just the wrong time to read it because of the slump that I was in. So that's my bad. But I do recommend it. It's very fun and interesting and exciting, and it's clean. So that's a win. Moving on, I picked up Lone Wolf by Reka Klassen. Chantel's daughter wrote this book, and Chantel had mentioned in one of her videos a while back that the price was going to go up on this book because of Amazon changing some things, and recommended for those of us who were wanting to get a copy to go ahead and get one. And so I did. I ordered this and read it pretty much right away as soon as I got it, and I loved it. I think it was very well done for having been written by a 12-year-old. I think she was 12 when she wrote it. I loved her humor. I loved just the way it was written. It was very unique, and I really enjoyed it. Anyway, we follow Hugo, who is a 12-year-old boy in foster care, and he's been living with this family, the Collins, for, the description says, 72 hours, and he's just hoping that this will be a different outcome than all of the other previous houses and families he's lived in. And it was well done. It was so heartwarming. It was humorous, and yet had a lot of depth to it as well. So I recommend. It was very beautiful, very well done, and I would love to read more of her books if she ever wants to write some more. So there we go, there's that one. And then next, I was inspired by Oshina's video of when she read this book, Edenbrook, by Julianne Donaldson, and I was able to get it from my library, read it on my Kindle, and let me just say, I adored this book so much. It was everything I could wish for. Are you okay? My dog is sneezing over here. Sorry about that. I'm gonna read what I wrote because I wrote it out immediately after I finished the book. I rated it 5 stars. I highlighted so many parts of this book. It was so well done. A Regency proper romance that felt like a classic but was very easy to read. Absolutely loved it. Anyway, here's what I wrote for my review. Why was that the sweetest, cutest little thing I've read in a while? The curse is broken. I didn't roll my eyes at a strictly romance novel because I don't just love the genre of straight romance. I would prefer historical romance. I prefer more depth of the plot line and characters with an underlying story of the romance. So anyway, for me personally and my taste, I find a lot of romance books just cheesy and not very believable sometimes, and just cringy. It depends. I've read a lot of really good romance books, but for the most part, I just feel like there's not a ton of depth to them, at least the ones I've read. So, but that's just a personal preference. Anyway, this one was not any of those things. Anyway, let me continue reading what I wrote. It was too much fun. I let myself enjoy it for what it was. I couldn't stop grinning. I laughed out loud a few times. The banter was believable and didn't feel immature or cringy like a lot that I read into. Happy sigh. My only qualm was that Marianne was 17 years old. And I know that's probably normal back then, but it just felt weird, and in my mind, I just imagined her older because that was just too weird for me to think about her being 17 and the guy being at least in his lower 20s, I guess. I don't know. I loved it, and I cannot lie. It was sweet, clean, fast-moving, and still a bit of a slow burn, and praises be, there were hardly any mentions of physical attractions. Like, yes, the word handsome and beautiful, etc. were thrown in, but the main characters fell in love with each other for who they were, and I appreciated that. The author put it in the back of her book this way. More elevating love stories and less of a focus on lust in today's romance novels. Yes, please. And this is probably one of my favorite quotes in the whole book. Don't think because I like to tease you that I don't take you seriously, he said in a quiet voice. It is an honor to know what's in your heart, Marianne. Stop it. I don't know. This book was just so well done. I loved it so much, and I rated it 5 stars. And I just think it was just such a well done romance books. Like, if all strictly romance books could be written like this, I would read them probably. So there we go. Highly recommend. And also go watch Oshina's video of her reading this book. I'll link it down below. And then Amanda also just read the book and released her vlog for it, so go watch that one too if you haven't seen it. It was so good. I didn't feel it was cheesy at all. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was way too much fun. Did I even talk about Edenbrook? You know what, let's scratch this. What was Edenbrook about? Basically, we follow Marianne, who she has a twin sister who is living in London, who has already come out in society, but Marianne hasn't yet because she's been living with her grandma in Bath and thought her life was just absolutely boring, and she wanted to get away because there was an older man who was really gross. As Amanda said, it reminded me of Mr. Collins a lot in Pride and Prejudice. But she wanted to get away from that, and so her grandma decides to send her to her friend's place, which was Edenbrook. And anyway, she is going to meet her sister there, who has been telling her about this family that lives at Edenbrook and how she has plans to marry the heir, and just so she can like have this high place of society. Anyway, Marianne is on her way to Edenbrook when her carriage is robbed by highwaymen, and the driver gets shot, and there's a lot of things that happen. She makes her way to an inn where she's asking for help for her coach, for the coachman that was injured, and that's where she runs into Philip. But she has no idea that he's one of the sons of the family who owns Edenbrook, but all of that is quickly revealed then, and we just follow their romance from there, which it's more of a friendship at first, which I enjoyed. There's a lot of banter and a lot of teasing and just wholesome friendship, and which slowly turns into romance, and it was beautiful. I loved it. It was so much fun. So then I picked up the prequel to the book, Heir to Eden. So this would have been like Philip's perspective, but only like the beginning up until the point that he meets Marianne, and then the book ends, and then you would read Edenbrook. I didn't give this a rating because it was so short. It's less than 50 pages, but I did like that perspective. You only get Marianne's perspective for the most part in the actual book, and so it was fun to see Philip's side of things, especially when they first met, because that was the most hilarious situation. It was so funny, but I loved it, and I liked seeing Philip's perspective on that. So if you've read Edenbrook, please read Heir to Edenbrook. I don't think you really need to read it first, like before you read Edenbrook, but for sure read it maybe alongside it, maybe. I don't know. It was very good. And so then I picked up her other book that everyone was like, you have to read this one. Or if you enjoyed Edenbrook, you'd probably enjoy her next book, which is Blackmore, and so I read this one as well. This one felt a little different. So Edenbrook felt more, I would compare it to the feeling of like Jane Austen's books that are light and funny and witty and etc. But then Blackmore, I thought a lot of Wuthering Heights by Charlotte Bronte. I don't know. This book Blackmore just reminded me more of the Bronte style of writing that had a little bit more of a dark academia feel to it, because it was set in the moors, and there's like, Blackmore is a huge estate that has secret passageways, so it had more of a feel of like the darker academia side versus light academia that I feel like Edenbrook would kind of fall under. But I thought this one was well done as well. I did only rate it 4 stars because it was just a little heavier than Edenbrook, which is fine, but we follow Kate, who has pretty much sworn off marriage, and we don't really know why until later in the book. All of these things are slowly being revealed, but she's best friends with Henry and Cecilia, I think are their names. They're a sibling duo, and they would always leave over the summertime, I think, to go to their other home, which is Blackmore, and Kate has always dreamed of going with them to see it, but she comes from a family that is a little bit known for their scandalous behavior, particularly her mom and her sister, and it's definitely not condoned. And it was just really sad because she knew it was wrong, their behavior, and she never wanted to be associated with them, but she kind of just was because they were her family. And there's just a lot of those different layers in this story. But basically that Kate has sworn off marriage. She doesn't want to be associated with her family as much just because she's embarrassed by their behavior in society. And like I said, she's been wanting to go visit Blackmore for years, and it finally happens, but she makes a deal with her mom that if she's gonna go, she needs to somehow obtain 3 marriage proposals. And if she gets 3 marriage proposals but rejects them all, she will be allowed to go to India with her aunt. And if she does not get those 3 proposals, then she has to do whatever her mom asks her to do, and which could include marrying whoever her mom says she has to marry. And so Kate readily agrees to this simply for the fact that she wants to go visit Blackmore. And she's been desperate, and it's something she's been dreaming of for years. So yes, Kate journeys to the stately manor of Blackmore, determined to fulfill her end of the bargain and enlists the help of her dearest childhood friend, Henry Delafield, who is the heir to Blackmore. But when it comes to matters of love, bargains are meaningless and plans are changeable. There on the wild lands of Blackmore, Kate must face the truth that has kept her heart captive. Will the proposal she is determined to reject actually be the one thing that will set her heart free? So, yeah, I did enjoy this book. I rated it 4 stars. It'd probably be closer to 4.5. It just didn't quite have the 5-star feeling that Edenbrook had, but I really enjoyed it. I'm just reading some of the quotes that I highlighted, and just my heart is touched again. It was just another very well done book, and I do recommend it. Okay, so the next 2 books that I'm going to talk about, I mentioned in the last vlog that I just posted, but I was trying to finish these 2 books in June to count as June reads. And the first one of those books being Raising Tiny Disciples by Felicia Masonheimer. Actual advice to enjoy the process and enjoy your kids. And I really appreciated this book. It's one of those things that she's not going to tell you. She doesn't tell you how to raise your kids. She just talks about how they have chosen to raise their kids and the motivation behind it and the biblical foundation behind it. And I always appreciate that about Felicia. She never tells you what to believe. She just tries to help you to know what to believe and how to implement those things into your life. And I found this book to be very helpful. I tabbed a lot, I highlighted a lot, and it's a book that I will come back to. And there's just a lot of wisdom in here, I believe, and wisdom that I want to take and apply it to our family and how we want to raise Eden and any future children that the Lord willing will give us. And yeah, I recommend this. She said she wanted to write it because there are so many parenting books out there, but none of them seem to really give practical tips on how to apply the things that they're teaching in their books. And so that's why she wrote this one. So I do recommend it. It was very, very well done, short and concise, but practical, and I really loved it. The last book that I read was The Roads We Follow by Nicole Deese. So this was book number 2 in the Fog Harbor series, and we are following Reagan, who is a daughter of a country music legend, and she has for a long time wanted to establish her own identity as a person, like apart from her famous mom and the family name. So she's an author, and so she wants to publish a book under a pseudonym, but people don't really want to publish her book because she doesn't have any other published works, and these publishing companies don't want to take her on because they're afraid it might fail. But if she would write under her maiden name, then it would be guaranteed success because her name is very familiar to a lot of people in the country. But she doesn't want to exploit her mom's fame, and so she just decides to put it off for a while. But in the meantime, her mom is wanting to do one last road trip, kind of like her final tour, just to kind of retire. But she's wanting to take this road trip and kind of backtrack the trip she would have taken back when her career first started with her best friend. And they hire a driver who just so happens to be the son of her mom's best friend. But something happened in their career that they split up, and so they hadn't talked to each other for 30 years. And so Reagan, the main girl, her name, she did not grow up knowing Micah, but Micah ends up being their bus driver. And also in this whole process, Reagan finds out that there is a book being published that's kind of like a tell-all, spilling family secrets, but also including a lot of things that were not true about the family. And Reagan's trying to decide if she wants to tell her mom and her sisters about it and what she could do about it. And at the same time, Micah also has his own kind of secret mission things that he's trying to figure out in the meantime as well. But anyway, Reagan and Micah obviously develop a friendship and eventually a romance, so that's fun. That's great. I loved the characters in here. I loved I just love the way Nicole explores the topic of grief and family dynamics, of what healthy versus unhealthy communication is, and all of that. Again, I rated it 4 stars. Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I would recommend it as well. I am looking forward to reading the last book in the series. I can't remember what it was called, and I feel like it was just recently released. There it is, The Voice We Find. Yeah, it was just released in April of this year, so I need to get my hands on this book and read it as well, because I am thoroughly enjoying this series. But anyway, that concludes all of the books that I read in June. It was a great reading month. I really enjoyed pretty much all of these books except Honor in the Dust, which was unfortunate. But it was just a good, happy reading month, and I loved it. Pretty much all of the books were 4 or 5 stars, so that's a win in my book. Anyway, that is it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know if you've read any of these books or which ones you are interested in reading if you have not read any of them. But anyway, thanks for being here, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Greetings, my fellow readers. What? Hair is super floopy today. I just washed it last night. It's just not doing great things. Oh my word, I'm so confused. I gotta switch back to Edenbrook instead of thinking about Blackmore. And editing me is gonna love this. Trying to switch it all back around.